explain is how
Uh,
SSIS. Mm-hmm.
you're quite faint.
Oh, okay. Just a sec. Let me try. Can you
Uh,
hear me now?
yeah, it's better, but still quite low though.
Okay, hold on. Let me check my mic settings. Now, Charles, is better?
Y- Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. So see, this slide here talks about how SSIS positioned into the data integration or the DI space comparatively. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the sections says leaders, which happens to be Informatica or IBM.
Okay.
IBM has this tool called Data Stage.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Then there are a couple of challengers, which happens to be like business objects also has an ETL tool, and then there's pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
But then this section here, which I call as niche players. Now this section has actually seen a lot of mushrooming growth, in the last 1 or 2 years. One of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons being, because most of the tools up here, like, the leaders in the space or the challengers or like categories, these softwares are pretty costly. So you have a lot of companies, but smaller companies or companies who are more into freelancing or sort of outsourcing, they cannot afford these ones. So then they would go in for softwares like say Oracle has that ODI or OWB, or Cognos also has a data manager, which we're talking about. Similarly, your Microsoft is SSIS or Amnesia. So these are cheaper comparatively, and still they can do the job pretty well if you are not talking about a lot of performance or bulk data. They
Okay.
work fine. So that's how Microsoft figures out. Okay. Now if we try and talk about the product suite, essentially here, it's comprised of three components. One is the integration service, which does the ETL part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's more of like a platform where you can do data integration, you can extract
Mm-hmm.
and transform data to an extent. Then you got the reporting service, RS, gets you a sort of functionality where you can do reporting on top of various data sources. You could create reports into formats and then also manage them into one place. Then they have also been trying to create an analytical service which is more like cubes and analysis. Now, though this OLAP solution from SQL Server is not really, like a used one, because there are other vendors or tools which do a lot better job. Like Cognos has its own cubes, even Business Objects has cubes. But still, for the sake of having something, they have created this analytical services. So that's the three main product suite components. Now, if I try and talk about the overview, so let's try and see, how did really integration services and all this come into pictures and where they started from. Okay. So in Tony, as you'll see, if I talk about the integration service, now this integration service, the tool or the package essentially is a graphical medium. It gets you a lot of flexibility in terms of performing, tasks like you could do FTP if you have it. You could execute statements, you could send out emails, you could transform and extract data from sources. You could even copy it out, integrate. So there's a lot of applications which an SSIS could do. Now if you look at the architecture, how is this designed, you first start with this step. That's step number one. This is called BIDS, Business Intelligence and Development Studio, which you have installed on your system. Now this is actually the same platform what Visual Studio uses. So you create your ETL stuff here. You would then deploy it to a server. So that's second step. You deploy it as a package. Okay. So now this package is then, when you do an execution, it runs on the runtime engine of the SSIS. Could be 32-bit or 64-bit, and that's how the complete cycle runs. So you develop in BIDS, you deploy the package, and package becomes like executable, which can then run.
So BIDS is come again is business what?
Intelligence and Business
And
Intelligence and Development Studio.
okay. Okay.
So if we try and have a look here, the BIDS. We're talking about this one, Business Legends Development Studio. Okay. Now, the overall. So what I spoke about here was an overview and a small architecture of SSIS. But when you look together at the bigger picture of how these tools are, put into one place, this is how you can, probably understand. First of all, this is the core components here. Okay. So at the lowest level, what we have is called a data flow task. Now, data flow task can be compared to an ETL mapping. So you'll see a data flow internally has a source, has a target, and within it has transformations. Now, data flow task, on top of that, what you create is called a task. So when is the data flow task? Now, task again could be, more of them. So there are multiple type of tasks. Finally, all this fits into something called as a package. This package then, becomes a runtime service, which can then be executed. Okay, so I repeat, what you create first of all is a task. Within a task, you can, look at this. You'll have a data flow. Then on top of a task, what you have is your like a runtime. It actually, so when I say runtime, what I really mean here is a package. So package is then deployed, and after deployment, you can execute that. So this is the deploy step. Now, when you deploy, what happens? Deploy means you are actually putting it somewhere. So there are two options to deploy. One is you can deploy it to the MSDB database, which means whatever you are doing with the package, it is stored in an internal SQL Server database. So it's a system database, MSDB. Or the other option is you can deploy it not to the database but to the file system on the server. So then it is stored as a .dtsx file. Right, so two options to deploy. Okay, the other things which you will also have in SSIS are you have data sources where you read the data from. You have a log provider which does the logging, like step by step, and task, as I said. Okay, apart from that, you got SSIS designer. You got some of internal wizards like step by step automated procedures to do some of the functionalities. So finally, this is how an SSIS architecture would be.
Okay, so what is the command line utilities?
Okay, now SSIS also gives you, if you have, so I think that's a different version altogether, because it's a Windows product. So there is something called as a Windows API programming. So if you are good at Windows programming, you can also call these from there, because as I said, this complete tool is actually running on a Visual Studio internally, and Visual Studio goes with the VB scripting. So if you know VB scripting, you can create internal utilities, which just on a click of a button would call that automatically. So that's what. So you might be using it, not really. At least I haven't seen it, apart from just one of the projects at Morgan Stanley, and that too because when they were trying to do some of their own custom transformation. Else, it's like complex stuff because you need scripting and programming all that problems, right? Okay. Now, this slide would actually try and explain how SSIS really evolved. So people think that SSIS started with 2005, but that was not true. These guys came up with something called DTS, which was data transformation dynamic. No, DTS was data transformations. Yeah, DTS used to be called as data transformation services, which was actually launched in the 2000 edition of the SQL Server. The only difference at that point of time was that DTS was not meant to be an ETL tool. They were using it for some internal processing. But then going forward over a couple of years, they realized that DTS could be just they could recode it completely, and then what they did was they came out with SSIS. So that's how it evolved. So we try and talk about what are the differences between the SSIS and DTS. One of the biggest achievements was the processing speed. DTS, as I said, was not meant to be an ETL tool, so it was slow. SSIS is a lot faster if you compare it with that. In terms of scalability, the DTS was only running on a what we say proprietary sort of format. So it was not built to be distributed across systems. But now since SSIS runs on .NET architecture also, you can easily distribute this package, because you can install .NET everywhere, so it runs, and that's the scalability option.
So can you tell me a little bit about this .NET that you know?
Okay, see, .NET, is more is okay. .NET is this how when we started with these programmings, what came first was Java, and Java was based on the concept of a VM or a virtual machine. So when people used to create Java, programs, and when they used to compile it, what it really created was called a bytecode. So bytecode was a machine language or assembly language program, which they no longer had the programming syntax. It was only a binary executable file, and therefore it could run on any machine. So that was Java. But the main drawback with Java was it is still very what we say scalable and has a lot of performance if we talk about the core performance and computation. So a lot of internal bank systems would use Java, but Java was not built to be looking nice front end tools. So then they came up with another version which they used to call as .NET. So today most of the window products that you see are built on .NET platform. So it's again a programming plus GUI sort of combination, which gives you both the options and flexibility of a Java plus nice front-end tools.
Okay.
So that's what .NET means.
Okay.
And
So .NET is still based on Java, except it has a better front end and
yeah, right.
development
So
environment.
they really have also changed a lot of things internally, but still the root has been derived from Java. So they might have
Okay.
changed some syntax internally, but still people who are from Java would be able to understand it better.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you relate 2005 to a little bit of 2008 that you know?
Okay, I do.
IIS
Sure,
2008?
I'll do that. But I think for that, I'll just pull out one of these slides from their own website. Because yesterday I
Okay.
was going through that, I
Okay.
didn't see much of the differences. But let me put out a slide and
Okay.
let's see how they are different. We'll see that. Maybe like tomorrow
Okay.
or day after tomorrow. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Other difference in terms of scope, as I've already said, that DTS was never meant to be doing the ETL or the transformations. Now SSIS is built specifically to do those complex transformations and data warehousing stuff. Okay, and then you can also customize. So customize means you can add your own transformations. Okay, one of the options is good here. Since it is again a reducible format, what you can do is you can create a package in SSIS which does, let's say, complex task, and then you can distribute it. It's like in a way you're selling your solution. So you could do that in SSIS. Customization is also possible. Okay, now as I said,
Okay.
internally this is how the structure is. At the lowest level is what we call as components or executables. On top of that, what you have is a data flow item. Above data flow, there's a control flow. Then you got a container, and then you got a package. So these are just
Okay.
terms. We'll would be seeing it in detail as we go through.
Okay.
So package the root level, which you finally deploy to any server.
Okay. Is the endpoint the
Yeah,
last
exactly. Yes, true.
object that you so, okay. And that's the one you deploy to the database or to the file.
File, absolutely. Yeah, correct. Yes. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's do one thing. Let's open up the tool itself and let's see how it looks like.
Okay.
Give me a second. I'll have. Okay, I think no, it's still opening. Perfect. Okay, now here we are. So now let me. I think today I'll just explain how it looks like, and there's a lot of things to look at.